I'm going to get started, and I want to welcome Mr. Bill Gardner, who almost has his doctorate. He's very, very close, very close. He is an assistant professor of cyber forensics and security at Marshall. His research focuses on motivations of online criminals, cybersecurity, cyber warfare, and penetration testing. He is a co-author of the books Google Hacking for Penetration Testers and Building an Information Security Awareness Program, Defending Against Social Engineering and Technical Threats. His most recent publications are Social Engineering in Russian Nonlinear Warfare in the Journal of Applied Digital Evidence, and I Did What I Believe is Right, a study of neutralizations among anonymous operation participants in the Journal of Qualitative Criminology. Those were big words, but I got through them.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Thank you, Dr. Gardner.
You're fine. Just call me Bill, please.
Thank you,
It's
Bill,
fine.
for being here.
You're
And
welcome.
This is a topic that our group is always asking about, and we're excited to turn it over to you.
Awesome. Let me figure out how to share my screen here. It's been a while since I've used Zoom, since we went back to being on in person, and now here it is. I found it. It's always a good thing if you know how to share your screen. Can you all see my screen?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, I also turned on closed captioning so that we have a little live captioning going on at the bottom for those that might need it, or who knows if it will understand me as much as I mumble in my crazy Richwood / Huntington accent to kind of throws off things like AI trying to do speech to text. So this is based off the book and some presentations I've done. I come from a background of working in law firms for over 20 years in network infrastructure and security. I originally built the last law firm that I was in did not have a security awareness program. They had all these wonderful technical things, firewalls, blinking light boxes that did magical anti-hacker stuff. But in the end, people are the weakest link. And really, the process of over a few years building that sort of program led to me writing this book with my co-author. And here's basically this presentation comes from both an organizational look at the problem as well as a personal look at the problem. Here's the book. It does make good Christmas gifts, birthday gifts, Valentine's presents. So it's really written for organizations to secure their networks. Again, we're spending a lot of money on cybersecurity, but it only takes one person to click a link, open an attachment. It only takes one person to be compromised for the rest of the organization to be compromised. Then that compromise can be used to gain more access to the network or to your home system. And this is all, once again, sort of organizational talk about what do you need, policies and procedures, user awareness training, and then you throw all the technical stuff on the top of the pyramid. So patch management, log management, et cetera, et cetera. But yes, you yourself need to be aware that you need to be patching as far as policies and procedures. Who are the users on your accounts? If you're using Windows, you automatically log in as administrator. You might think about making other accounts for other people in your house that don't have administrative privileges. That way it helps if they do something like click on something or open an attachment, it sort of guards your stuff from being compromised. Antivirus, you can't get away without antivirus, but today Windows comes with built-in antivirus, Windows Defender, which works pretty well. You can buy something else if you want to. The problem with installing 2 antiviruses on a computer is they'll butt heads and they'll slow your computer down. So you should be good just with the Microsoft product. Because security appliances, you can install these in your home, but as long as you have an up-to-date router, which should have came with your from your ISP, whether that's DSL or um, a cable modem or some, heck, I don't know, somebody might have fiber. You might have the newest, hottest thing, which is Starlink. This idea that Elon Musk put these satellites in the air to beam you internet. So they're going to give you equipment which should be out of the box configured correctly to give you some security. If you want to look into those configurations yourself, there should be documentation that came with the equipment, or you can look it up online. So again, this is sort of the old way that networks are built. This includes the network at your home. Instead of client workstations, it would be your home computer, your cell phone, your television oftentimes is now connected to the internet. We're now in this age of Internet of Things. Your refrigerator could be hooked to the internet. People have internet-enabled stoves. Probably the largest IoT devices found in a home is the thermostat and the home security system. So all of those things are being protected by this firewall. But if you click a link or open an attachment, or you get called by somebody who says that they're with the local security, with another or a local security company that wants to sell you a home security system, to start asking you a lot of uncomfortable questions, don't talk to them. But as we've moved during COVID, we were talking about this earlier, and sort of into the cloud, working, personal meetings, all this is more towards Zoom. It's so that what you're trying to secure is not just in your house, it's all over the place. So security awareness training and social engineering specifically becomes more of an issue. So the textbook definition of security awareness and training is a formal program with the goal of training users of potential threats and how to avoid situations that might put the organization or yourself at risk. That's telling me my internet's bad. Darn you, Marshall, for bad internet. So in information security or in cybersecurity, people are the weakest link. People don't know things. As a result, you have to inform them to the threats and the things to do and the things not to do in order to be safe. If you look at every recent high-profile attack, including Colonial Pipeline, it was originally the first attack that gained a foothold in the infrastructure was social engineering. They either called somebody and had them open a link or click on an attachment, or they were able to get some passwords, some credentials, and then use that to gain access to Colonial Pipeline's infrastructure. In that case, it was kind of weird because it was a ransomware attack. Ransomware is when a criminal organization or a criminal person, most likely it's an organization at this point. Cybercrime is $1 billion a year industry at this time. So in this case, someone gave some credential. It's unclear to me, looking at sort of the recent coverage of this, what happened, and that's probably because they don't want people to know what happened. Publicly traded companies are not very forthcoming about security issues, but we do know that it was a social engineering attack, whether it was an attachment, someone calling, getting a password or other credentials, etc. So, and the only way of really securing that is to inform people of the risk and how to defend themselves of the risk. So not all attacks are technical. In fact, if you look at all breaches over the past 6 or 7 years, 99.9% of them are social engineering. The other probably 1% is misconfiguration, which are all people problems. Not that technical hacking doesn't happen, but usually it's pretext by social engineering attack. We have firewalls. We've done all this work to engineer secure systems, but yet if the human factor comes into play, it weakens all those systems to the point where they're more likely to be compromised. Here again, policy development. We talked about this before. In your case, production increases and cost savings does apply to you in an organization. Think about the organizations you're involved in now, nonprofits, what you do for a living, all that. This applies to all those sorts of organizations as well as your personal computer. We all are involved in something. I noticed the Gilpins are online. We go to church together. So, we're involved in an organization that has information and things that need to be protected. So even your local church is an organization to think of that needs to have protection beyond technical. Also, people who are in key positions need to understand cyber threats and how to avoid them. These are targeted attacks. The days of casting a wide net to try to catch people and steal their credit card information or their social security numbers is very passé. We have organizations, sometimes state-sponsored, that are engaged in these prolonged campaigns. Many of these organizations are in office blocks and office buildings, and their job is to hack America or hack Americans. So the majority of this stuff that's going on is organized crime, and a lot of it is organized crime protected by the Russian government. Now, they did go out and start rounding up some of these ransomware gangs, but there's many more out there. There's a lot of hackers in the Far East are being protected by the Chinese government. So, it's you against organized crime. That's a pretty scary thing to think about. In most organizations, you have 1 or 2 people to defend your network. Hate to say that in the case of Marshall University, I think we might have 3 people who are defending our network. CISO, and he's got a couple people that works for him. So these overwhelming odds are kind of scary. And one of the ways you try to level the playing field is to have security awareness so that people know what to do and not to do, not what to do. Not all users are the same. In the case of targeted phishing, they're going to target people who are most likely not in the office. They're not going to target people in the mailroom because they don't have enough access. They're going to try to figure out who has the most access. In many cases, that's the IT department. But the IT department is the worst about falling for social engineering. Their job is to provide good customer service to get things done. So they're very prone to falling for social engineering. Different users encounter different risk. So if you're a CEO of a company, you have a different risk than somebody who has a lower position or on the organizational chart. And different users have different levels of education and understanding. I have a background in journalism, and we used to write at a 6th grade reading level. And I think recently they've dropped that maybe to a 5th grade reading level because generally people have a certain level of education. So if you're talking to them about cybersecurity threats and how to defend against them, you want to target it so that it's understandable to them. And this is the last one here that I got in a big argument with somebody about. Home users face different risks than corporate users. The answer to that question is yes and no. I don't think that you're going to be targeted specifically by government organization, but you will be targeted by scammers and other people who are out to make a fast buck. Usually those people aren't as organized and don't have as good of tools to perpetrate crime as governmental organizations, which are well funded. In some cases, they're actually part of the army of a foreign nation. Does anyone have any questions before I rattle on? Anybody? So the question becomes, how often do you do security awareness training? Most of the times, a new employee gets it when they come through the door. Many corporations only do it once a year, which is really not enough, quarterly or continually. And the argument I make is that it has to be a continual message. It has to be like an internal public relations campaign. You're not going to beat people over the head, but you're going to remind them subtly. The idea is you're going to social engineer your users to be secure in the same way that attackers are trying to social engineer your users to be insecure. So constantly reminding them, and I know it becomes sort of pedantic at some point where you're telling them, oh yeah, well, don't click on links. Well, what does that mean? You have to explain to them what could be lost. In the case of an organization, it doesn't just have the organization's information. It has your information because they have to pay you. It has information about insurance, for example. Medical identity theft is a growing problem. And I come from the paradigm of law firms. Many law firms in West Virginia have more medical records than many hospitals in West Virginia. While they're not a covered entity under HIPAA, they still have a lot to lose. And think about all the other stuff that are in law firms. You've got personally identifiable information. You have, in many cases, industrial drawings of specific devices. You have the intellectual property of your clients. And whatever you get through discovery, you also have that information too. You need to protect all that. And we're going to look at a couple of cases where law firms and lawyers specifically have been targeted in the past. Most user awareness training we see now is canned. It's like, here's this movie of some guy that looks like a hacker, and they're going to give you some questions based on videos. Generally, it's not effective. It's no better than a blinky light box that's in your closet, in your rack, does some sort of super anti-hacker thing, but no one seems to know how to log into it. It's just not a good use of your time nor your budget. In-person training is the most effective, and honestly, I think we could call this in-person training. And that I'm not recording this. Well, I am for some folks, but I think in-person training is more impactful to people, and we also personalize training based upon their role in the organization or their needs. You don't have to spend a lot of money to build a good security awareness program. In fact, I built a number for $0. So the first step of user awareness is to explain risk. What is the risk? And what you'll hear a lot of times is nobody wants our data. Well, think of all the data you have, even personally. You've got credit card numbers, you've got information that would allow someone to log into your 401k plan, stock accounts. Some of us have crypto accounts because we're silly and we're young. We think we're going to make some money. We have all these things, financial, personal, etc., that we don't want other people to see. What you hold dear to yourself. That could be even information about your family. If someone were to steal your family's photos and then say that they're going to lock them up and ransom back to you, you're likely to pay the ransom because you don't want to lose those photos. Other people say it's all public information anyway. Anything that's not on your website is not public information. Anything that's not in a newsletter is not public information. Anything that's not on your Facebook profile is not public information. So you have a lot of personally identifiable information you're trying to protect, like where you live, how much you make, um, your social security number. Those are all things you need to guard. Regulatory compliance works for organizations to some extent, but just because you're compliant doesn't mean you're secure. Two of the ones we just talked, when we talked about HIPAA High Tech, which regards medical records for covered entities. Covered entities are things like hospitals, clinics, anyone who's engaged in a medical practice. Unfortunately, it does not apply to things like law firms and insurance companies. So they are not slapped with the same fines if they lose data. Breach notification laws applies to everybody. In West Virginia, we have a breach notification law that sets the bar for how many records have to be breached before you have to make a public statement or you have to start notifying the victims. Each state has their own breach notification law, and there's unfortunately 50 breach notification laws out there. That's one of the things I did cover in the book, is that I list all the different breach notification laws so that if you can go and find them. You can also use Google. West Virginia has a privacy officer that handles breach notification for every organization in the state of West Virginia. So if the hospital loses your records and it's enough of a loss of information to trigger breach notification under the law, you'll either get an email or a phone call. In many cases, organizations have to set up a call center to answer the question of those people who've had their data breached. In many cases, what organizations will do will give you free credit reporting, which really doesn't fix anything, but it helps, I guess, helps you feel better if you have any more issues that you can check your credit report. So the biggest motivation of attackers is money, of course. This is identity theft, credit card theft. Second one is industrial espionage. The Chinese have been engaged in industrial espionage for years. I don't have personal information on this one. I will talk about it based upon the public information that I do have, which is the Chinese came over and said they're going to give state of West Virginia and some of the companies here a lot of money in order to get involved in our fracking business. The whole idea of fracking and extracting gas through the process. In that case, they came up, shook a lot of hands, slapped a lot of people on the back. Then some of our people went over to China, and they took their personal devices, which is a very bad thing. If you ever go to China, don't take your personal device. It is likely to be compromised while you're in China. But in that case, the pretext was that there was going to be a large investment in the state, oil and gas. Those people never came back, and I would surmise they came over and learned all they could about our fracking process, and then took it back to China so that they could do fracking in China without any sort of investment. We've seen other situations like this happen, even to the point of military hardware. There'll be a breach at a military contractor, and 6 months to a year later, they have the exact same device that we were developing. Industrial espionage also is things like, can you steal a secret formula for Coke? You can make your own Coke, right? The other was hacktivism. Have you all heard of Anonymous? So that's this group of people that went around breaking into through other agencies and taking down websites, specifically targeting law enforcement because they didn't agree with specific laws. one of them is the PayPal hack. 17 people ended up going to jail for that. They were launching denial of service attacks against PayPal because they would not take donations to defend Julian Assange. Julian Assange is this guy that has been for years gathering secret information that's been leaked and then giving it to dissidents and people who are interested in it, and allegedly, possibly at one point, he was involved in an election here in the United States where data was stolen, given to Assange, who then passed it on. He is now in jail after seeking refuge in I think it was the Ecuadorian embassy in UK. But anyway, he's sitting in jail waiting trial on charges of espionage. The second one is cyber warfare. So nation state against nation state. We're watching cyber warfare right now unfold in Ukraine. Ukrainian banks have been down for a number of hours over the last 48 hours. They've targeted train stations. In the past, the Russians took down the Ukrainian power grid. And also part of cyber warfare is information campaigns or misinformation campaigns. Right now, we've got the situation where it looks like a false flag incident in Ukraine where perhaps the Russians are accusing the Ukrainians of breaking the ceasefire because Eastern Ukraine it has a separatist group, and they've been fighting now for probably 6-7 years. Yes, Caroline. Someone had their hand up. Okay. Does anyone have any questions? And the last one is bragging rights. So if you're, in my culture, I'm in hacker culture. I'm a good hacker, not a bad hacker. If you can pull off some really cool hack, of course, I'm not going to do that unless I have permission to do that. One of the things I do is I do penetration testing, where I have permission to break into people's networks and steal their data, and then write a report about the amount of access I could get. We were on a recent one involving, I was subcontracted to another company where we doing critical infrastructure, and technically they were golden, but we were able to use social engineering to get inside the organization and actually walk away with a lot of different information that we shouldn't have. In that case, what we do is we write a report, we give them the information that we were able to steal, and then they pay us for doing that. So that's one of the things that we do in this program, is to train people to do penetration testing and security assessments, including physical security assessments. We actually spent yesterday in a class picking locks. And I don't teach lock picking so that people can go out and break into houses. I teach lock picking so they understand how they're built and how many locks are flawed. So whenever they're either doing a physical assessment against a client, or if they're selecting locks for their own or even their own house, they understand some locks are better than others. But that's one of the things we do too. I don't do that anymore. I'm too old to climb through windows or dig through garbage cans. Let's leave that for the younger people. And as far as bragging rights go, it's a cultural thing, It's sort of like saying if you're in a motorcycle gang and you can do the best wheelies, you're going to show off. It's the same sort of thing. Computer's doing something weird. Here we go. So the cost of breaches is astronomical. Billions of dollars was lost every year in breaches. So you've got the expense of cleaning up the breach. You have the expense of reporting the breach. You have the expense of trying to make sure that the breach doesn't happen again. So these are some of the threat actors out there. We talked about Russians, Russian business network. It's not only the Russian army. RBN is is organized crime basically in Russia that's protected by the Russian government. Chinese hackers, which we alluded to before, they're mainly after intellectual property, hacktivism. We talked about anonymous people who are hacking for political reasons. Instead of going out and picketing the front of a building carrying signs, they deface websites and put up their own message. And we'll look at an example of that here later on. And cyber war, which again, we're witnessing right now. The Russians have been at cyber war for a long time. At one point they took Estonia off the internet just to prove that they could do it after Estonia became its own country, because we have all these, the Russians left behind after the Soviet Union broke up, these graves of Soviet soldiers in town squares, which was accompanied by a statue. And in Estonia, there was a big squabble about the Estonians wanted to move the statue and the graves, and the Russians said, we don't believe you are going to do that. And they did it anyway, so they just took them off the internet. So this is an example of non-kinetic warfare. In that case, it lasted a couple of days, and it was just basically seen as punishment, as that don't screw with us, us being the Russians, or we're going to mess with your internet. And your ability to do things like bank, which is a big problem. So we talked about Russia's business network, commonly abbreviated as the RBN, multifaceted criminal organization. They sell guns, they sell people. They're just not very nice folks. Specialize in identity theft or resale. Credit card theft's their favorite thing to do. Now we're seeing them get into cryptocurrency theft as well. Chinese hackers, these people are mainly part of the Chinese army. And some of the things they've done in the past, there's APT, Advanced Persistent Threat. Now we have APT groups across the world. So each one of these have an APT designation. So when we start talking about specific kinds of hacks, we can classify them. So there's APT 35. I can't remember. I'd have to look it up. Is the Chinese, and then the Russians have their own APT code. North Koreans is another player. And APT stands for Advanced Persistent Threat. These people are advanced, they're persistent, and they can go on for years trying to break into a network or an organization, or the United States government for that matter. Hacktivism is the use of nonviolent or legally ambiguous, or some case illegal tools in the pursuit of political ends. So this includes things like web defacements, redirection attacks, denial of service attacks, and identity theft. Anonymous is dead basically here in the United States, but there are hacktivists out there that strike every once in a while. We still have a lot of hacktivism going on in Central South America. People that don't agree with their governments are defacing websites continually, or they're leaking information, governmental information, for political reasons. They're not doing it for financial reasons. They're doing it because they want political change. And we look at this as electronic civil disobedience. Cyber warfare, we see all these wonderful charts and graphs that tell you absolutely nothing, but that's a really nice graphic. Cyber warfare is nation state against nation state. 2017, we just talked about the Estonia event. Most attacks are targeted. They're targeting you because you're in a specific career, or you have a specific position, or you're a security researcher. Security researchers like myself were targeted recently as last year, where basically The attack was, hey, I built this new tool, take a look at it and tell me what you think. Because the North Koreans trying to steal my exploit development. They're trying to steal research. So there's many different kinds of ways these attacks happen. Mainly is there's social engineering, which is then followed up through some sort of technical attack. Here's an example. Of course, it's 2010. It's a little old, but law firms are lucrative targets of cyber scams. In this case, a Long Beach law firm received an email from a Hong Kong business entity seeking help collecting debts from an American customer. After a month of signing paperwork and exchanging phone calls, with his client, the attorney received word that the debtor had sent $200,000 cashier's check to pay off the balance. The attorney then deposited it in his firm's account, subtracted 10% for his fee, of course, and wired the remaining to Hong Kong. Well, guess what? The check was a forgery. So basically, the firm had been duped out of $190,000. And that's based on, it's a real thing. Here's one. This is also specific to law firms. A DC law firm defended some U.S. Marines. They say received no jail time for a civilian massacre in Iraq. So ANISAC, which was a part of Anonymous, they're the more technical hackers associated with Anonymous, defaced the website of the firm. And this is kind of hard to see. They didn't just defaced the website. They also stole email and started publishing on Pastebin, which is a paste site, which is public. And this was covered by Gawker, et cetera, but this is an example of some of the email that was stolen. And they took down their website. They didn't have one for years, and I haven't looked recently. They still seem to be in business, but this is the kind of situation that you just basically destroy your business.
So, Bill, question, or so it's interesting to me that all of a sudden just the reality is that when you say that people are the weakest link, when you show this, that a law firm, as an example, not to be judgmental, but here we are, some of us, or many of us, all of us, concerned about phishing and opening up our emails, always through kind of continuous messages said, don't open attachments, don't. So, but here's an example of, even you're suggesting, a law firm or a business who buys into something or thinks that it's going to be a legitimate thing and gets hacked. I think it's just an interesting correlation. I just cannot imagine. Do you get what I'm?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean, the thing about security, cybersecurity, is you'll never be 100% safe. The idea is to increase the security as much as you can. And the reason I use these two examples, and I'll show you another one, is that lawyers are very well-educated people.
Yeah.
And you would think that they would not fall for these scams, but what it shows is we're all capable of falling victim to these sorts of crimes. I mean, it's not a technical attack. We're talking about confidence men have been around for years. These swindlers, these and all they've really done in this case is they've taken they're swindling online, and there's now tools that make it available. I've been social engineered before. I realized that after it happened, and you try to limit the blast zone so that it doesn't turn into a bigger compromise. And awareness is really the only way of fixing the human problem. The problem really is we keep seeing the same sorts of problems with people falling victim to these sorts of things over and over and over again. And then we have to come back with this beating the drum of don't click, don't open attachments, don't go to places where you don't know, even if it looks legitimate. And I know it's tiring. The message gets sort of malaise because, oh goodness, this thing again. And that's one of the reasons I argue for it to be more like a internal public relations campaign. There are other organizations that provide this. I noticed AARP had some things about this that came through my email recently. So everyone's trying to work on this problem, but we've never fixed it. Did I answer your question? Did I ramble?
Oh yeah, no, I mean I just, it was probably an observation as much as a question.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
You're
Thank
fine.
you. No, but it's
Well, thanks. Thanks. I like to see this as more of a conversation than me just talking. So I appreciate. In this case, I've already lost my place. This is about clicking links. FBI, they inform public relation firms and lawyers that they were being targeted. Why? Because public relation firms, they dress nice, they have nice offices. Lawyers, they dress nice and they have nice offices, and they think they have a lot of money. And I always say, if you saw the student loan debt of any of these people, you wouldn't think they had a lot of money. So that's an example of spear phishing, which one of the things we call targeted phishing. And they were using spoofed email lines to engage the recipient with specific business content. So a lot of times what they'll do is they'll try to figure out who your organization does business with or who you do business with, and they'll target you based upon that information they can gather. And this is we call this open source intelligence. This is a matter of going to your social media sites, if you have social media, or in the case of lawyers, in many cases, if you go to the website, you're going to find a bio. You can use the information you find in that bio to leverage targeted social engineering or spear phishing or any other sort of targeted attack. We don't realize we have a lot of information about ourselves online. I've got social media. I've got the information that Marshall publishes about me on the website. If you do a Google search, you're probably going to find my information spread all over the internet. That's just the way life is. So you can't really limit the amount of stuff that's on the internet. Of course, if you have social media, lock it down the best you can. In that, make it friends only, etc. But there's no way of going out and erasing content on the internet. And so just be careful. Here's a case, Canadian, this is a potash deal. And I'm like, I'm in the wrong business. I think potash may be its future. The Chinese-based hackers, because it was in the economic interest of the Chinese, were able to derail a $40 billion acquisition of the world's largest potash producer by an Australian mining firm by targeting law firms on Toronto's Bay Street, home of Canadian law firms handling the deal. So who's responsible for security? You are. We're the ones that are in the end, it's the last mile. We are the final person between them and the information. Okay. Tom just asked a question about COVID. Yes, we've seen attack increase because of working home through COVID. As I said before, we're outside of the fortress walls of our organizations. COVID is something that impacts everybody. And we've seen, one of my students did a research paper on the amount of phishing attacks and social engineering attacks that we're seeing over a period of time, just based on COVID and COVID misinformation in many cases. So yeah, that's one way of getting people to click links. And if you're home, you might have a company computer, or you might have your own computer. You might have your own computer and you're connecting to the company's network, which in itself, if your computer is somehow breached, you can spread an infection of whatever your computer might have to the rest of your company's network. And it's a real easy pretext for social engineering. Yes, please feel free to ask questions.
And by the way, I would assume that even in terms of company or as individuals, a lot of even our email, the component in terms of we have the possibility of even infecting our contacts and those kinds of things.
That's true.
Is that I mean, just in terms of a simplistic.
Yeah. We've seen those sorts of attacks. They were more prevalent in the past, where you become infected with something. The malware immediately looks at your address book and spreads it. Spreads that malicious link to other people. And those attacks aren't as prevalent as they used to be. They are still prevalent on social engineering, Facebook Messenger, for example. If you click on some links and it's got malware, it will send it out to other people in your contacts.
And Bill, and I'm sorry, I did one other question about that. So the difference of you tend to I tend to think of my spam folder as a hot box. I mean, that's I mean, I'm going to make the automatic assumption that my spam folder is going to none of those are things I ever want to click.
Right, I understand. You're absolutely right.
But isn't there but then all of a sudden you'll get some email that then gets kind of disguised,
right?
That it didn't go into spam, but it looks disguised so that it's so quote unquote legit, and it's the same issue and problem. It's hot, or what I would call hot.
Basically, spam filtering is based upon blacklisting of known spam that's circulating, and it's based upon heuristics in that it tries to examine email for malicious content, but still some of those get through. And if they do, you just have to not click on them, no matter how juicy they look. We'll never eliminate spam. We'll never eliminate social engineering. All we can do is try to do our best to raise awareness so that we're not setting ducks for these sorts of scams.
Okay, Bill, I'm curious, how valuable are VPNs in preventing entry to your computer or hacking or whatever?
VPNs are good for like point-to-point communications. For example, a VPN to your office would be great, because that means when you VPN to your office, you're using their resources and you're back inside the castle walls again. VPNs for normal people is a way of guarding your privacy, but it doesn't really do much for your security. So if you're VPNing, let me think of a good example where a VPN would be good for you, or for any other person. If you're sitting in a coffee shop and you want to check and see what your bank balance is, a VPN sends an encrypted line of communications out of that unsecured network. In the case of a coffee shop, you don't know who's listening to that communication or anything. So it allows you to set up a secure session between you and your bank so that someone in the middle can't read that communication, even before the bank itself also encrypts the communication. Does that make sense?
Sure. I do notice, though, that you have no trouble using a VPN for outgoing mail, say with Gmail. But
Uh-huh.
Comcast doesn't want you to use a VPN.
Nope.
It'll let you use it for incoming.
They don't want
But-
you to use anything on their network. The way that they've configured their network, they've made it difficult as possible for some reason for you to do something as simple as a VPN. And I don't know what problem that is. The only thing I can think of is they don't want people doing nefarious things on their network using VPNs. And that's probably the reasons they have those controls.
Okay.
Because I've done penetration testing. What I have to do is I have to go out and rent basically a computer in the cloud to do it with, because Comcast doesn't allow me to attack other people's computers using their network, even though I've got a permission slip and a get out of jail free card. They don't want their network to be used for nefarious purposes.
Okay. On one other slightly different question, I get more than my share of spam and whatever coming in because my name is out on the newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
And I recognize them. I don't answer them, but you can go, it looks like it's coming from something legit and you know it
Right.
is. And so you go to the sender and you can see it's from John Smith
Right.
at AOL.com. Is there any purpose in knowing this? You can't do anything about it. You see where it's coming from.
No, there's really nothing you can do about it. In many cases, these people are trying to spam us or scam us or in foreign countries for a reason, because the long arm of the law doesn't reach into foreign countries. We can't go to Russia and arrest the cyber criminals that are using ransomware. We can't go to China or any other country that does not have extradition or even a legal agreement. And sometimes we can send the FBI to question them, but we really can't do anything to them. One of the things we did in the case of ISIS is we knew that there was an ISIS hacker who formerly was a member of Anonymous, and he got droned. They were considered to be enough of a threat to the nation's infrastructure. They killed him doing a drone attack. But you really can't do anything about it. I guess you could drive to their house and beat on their door, but I'm not sure what that would do. If you call the police, they're not going to really be able to find out who that email belongs to without a lot of investigation. And most people don't have, a lot of law enforcement doesn't have the resources to do that.
So it really becomes the reality of just the nuisance. I mean, it's kind of, that's what I was alluding to a while ago about.
Yeah, it's a nuisance.
It becomes a nuisance. Now, an elementary question, just to follow up on what Diane's raising. Does clicking a link cause something, or is it always about attachment?
Clicking a link can send you to a website, or it can download a piece of malware onto your computer.
So yeah, so there your potential is to have in your mind. It's the potential of a malware.
Right.
Yeah.
And even sometimes you can click on a link and it will go to something that looks like it's BB&T or Truist Now.
Yeah.
And these attacks in those cases are password attacks. It's like your account has been compromised. Click here to change your password. It's really easy to set up a website that looks like your bank's website.
Right.
And so when you go to log in, it steals your password and your user ID, and then logs you into your legitimate site. So you really don't know that you've been hacked. I always say, if you get an email like that, to this day, if I get an email from my bank, I actually go to my bank's website and log in to see if there's an issue.
Yeah.
Those attacks teach a 7-year-old how to do those attacks. They're very easy to do.
Yeah.
Not that I want to teach a 7-year-old to do those attacks, but it's not completely hard.
Well, and with your premise, as you said earlier, people being the weakest link, it is taking us constantly. I don't care how intellectually we feel we are, or what, or as basic as we are, whatever along the spectrum,
Right.
it's the point is we have to keep saying that message.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Don't
Unfortunately.
click.
It's like, think of it as using your seatbelt. I mean, how much do we see click it or tick it? How much do we see Smokey saying, don't start forest fires? The idea is awareness, awareness without being, ridiculously boring about it. Awareness with the understanding that you have some skin in the game because we're protecting your information, whether it's organizational information that somebody you have a business relationship or, they have your stuff. So the idea is to just protect information. That sounds overly simplistic, but in the end, we're trying to protect ourselves, in some cases, protect our country. I mean,
So if I
our
click
case.
on a link that's
Mhm.
going to send malware to my computer, and I have installed malware bytes, will that prevent that malware from getting to my computer?
It does prevent the majority, but every day we see new malware arise. So it's not going to detect everything. It has sort of a list of things it knows about, but a very determined attacker will make their own malware, that they'll test against malware bytes to make sure it's not detected. So malware bytes updates itself constantly with these rules of, hey, we got these rules, we know about this malware. There's always going to be some malware it doesn't know about. And the only way of preventing it in that case is not to click on the link in the first place.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Does anyone else have any questions?
Thank you for some very good information and reminders that this is an ongoing struggle.
Yes, it is. In the same way, they have their campaigns, the things that they're doing. We have our own campaigns trying to defend against them. And technical software can do so much. I think with AI coming to the party, for lack of better words, we have now a software that has AI that does a better job, but in the end, it's going to be the human that's going to stop these attacks, not software.
Should we report when we know that we've gotten a situation where it is a hacker? Like, I know I got a email from the bishop of the West Virginia Conference United Methodist Church, supposedly asking me to go buy credit cards, and
Oh yeah,
and she was in a meeting and couldn't do it. Would I do her a favor? And of course, I knew it was
the best thing to do is to delete it and block it. I've gotten those before. I've gotten them from Dr. Gilbert. I've gotten them from my dean. And I know for a fact, I don't think Dr. Gilbert was emailing me from an important business meeting to go buy him iTunes cards. So in that case, delete and block, and there's not much more you can do. Just to protect yourself. There's a IC3, which is a FBI site, allows you to report these sorts of scams and things, but they get so many of them. What they do is they try to bundle them together to form cases, but generally just delete it and block it.
Delete it. Okay.
In Bill, in your field, and gosh, I'm just so thankful for your work. Cyber warfare seemed, I guess, because it's so for us, where we, as you alluded to earlier, where we're watching it.
Right.
As we move into the future, I mean, it just is greater and greater. Do you think that's the reality of the kind of the fears or the security concern that we have? Is that
I mean,
like thinking about the grid, the United States grid, the electric
right,
grid,
yeah. I mean,
those kind of things.
it's something to be concerned about. I wouldn't stay up at night worrying about it.
Oh, yeah.
We've got,
Yeah.
you
Remember,
know,
you're talking to a clergy person. I'm not gonna, we're not gonna worry at night.
no,
We're gonna-
I understand. I understand. I understand. Um, you know, those sorts of things are still a threat. We've been in each other's infrastructure for 30 years. We can turn off the lights in Russia as well as they can turn off the lights here. The problem really is it sort of looks like a cyber war turning into more of an atomic war incident. If you
Mhm.
turn off the power to a large population, that population is going to suffer and eventually die. And it's not because of the lack of internet, it's the lack of the ability to refrigerate food, the lack of the ability to do the normal things in the course of business. And it's really an end time sort of scenario if we were to do something like that. So we sort of have, in the same way we did with nuclear wars, nuclear capabilities, we've got this sort of mutually assured destruction. If one side does it, the other side will do it. So we're just afraid to do it at all. But it doesn't mean tactically, like in the case of Ukraine, that the Russians won't hit their power grid again and just turn off the lights in all of Ukraine. I do know for a fact that they've been training for this for a long time with their American counterparts. There's an exercise coming up here in about a month and a half where they're going to train based upon this scenario specific to Ukraine. So we're doing our best.
Yeah, yeah.
And as they get better, we get better. It's an arms race. It's a cyber arms race.
Mhm.
But I think cyber warfare is here to stay, and it's more likely to happen than kinetic warfare. I mean, look at the Iranians when they were enriching uranium, and they were able to shut down the enrichment process through malware. It's Stuxnet. It was the Latons. They had these spinning centrifuges, and they were able to make it look like inside the control room that everything was normal, including the video feed. But in the meantime, these things were spinning so quickly that they broke, and it set them back for years with developing their own nuclear capability. So it is kind of super secret spy world, but there's an ongoing conflict in the cyber realm constantly. The United States cybercom is constantly defending the United States critical infrastructure. So is DHS. We have very good people working on these problems, and that's the reason I say it is a threat, but it's probably just as nuclear. I mean, it's as likely as anything else. So I wouldn't particularly worry about it. Just did a test against a water treatment plants, and they were pretty good as far as their security goes. And I've done assessments of power grid, pretty good. You'd have to be a very determined attacker. In any case, in any scenario, a very determined attacker is always going to succeed. So you do the best that you can. Is there anything you can do in your daily life to secure the power grid or the water supply? Not really. So as a result, it's something kind of interesting to watch, but in the end, we have people doing that. We have processes and rules and regulations and laws that address those situations. Anyone else have any questions? What time we end this thing? I was looking at 5 after 12. Am I going too long, or should I
No,
keep going?
if everyone's interested, sure. And if
Okay.
people have to go, they will drop off. But if you still
Okay.
have more information for us, we're very happy to let you
Well,
continue.
I think this is probably a good place to stop, and we
Okay.
can pick up next Friday. Does anyone have any questions? Well, think of all of your questions you want to ask and come
Well-
back next week and we'll talk more about this.
Okay, I do want to say something. Working here at Marshall, we get emails that look so legitimate,
Oh, yeah.
and people come and go like in IT. But I have learned. I just send it. I send it to them. I learned. Thankfully, I have opened things probably when I shouldn't have, but it hasn't caused any damage. But now I don't want to open anything. And my bank, typically, when I've had to change my password and login information, it's because someone has tried too many times.
Right. Yeah.
And then
that
I
happens.
get locked out and I
Yeah.
have to make a phone call. And so that's
I could probably tell you which bank that is. And that's the only bank that does it that way. That is a problem with their process.
it used to be BB&T.
Okay.
Now
Yeah.
it's
I
Twist.
have the same bank.
Yeah.
But they
Yeah.
are also using two-factor authentication where it will send you a text message that
Yes.
helps with those brute force attacks. So if you have two-factor information, I mean, if you have two-factor authentication available, the best thing to do is to use it.
So, but I'm kind of gullible but I've learned, to trust no one. And my husband's an attorney. I kind of get that from him too. Like, don't open anything, don't answer
Yeah.
certain questions, don't do this, don't do that. So, but
Well,
you've
the
given us,
law firms used to be notorious for their lack of cybersecurity preparations and programs, but it's gotten a lot better.
yep, it's sad when we get attacked and then we can't get into our stuff. And
Yeah.
I get a little frustrated when I have to call the bank and go through all this, but it's good. It's for me that they're doing this, but I have to take time out of my schedule to
Right.
make phone
It's
calls.
it's your time.
Yes.
You're trading your time for the aggravation of dealing with their lack of process. So, I understand what you're saying.
Well, thank you. This has been great information. And thank you for everyone that was able to get on today. And we will see you again next Friday at 11 o'clock and we'll continue. And again, if anyone has any questions, jot them down so we can discuss them next week.
Yes. Thank you all. I really enjoyed it.
We enjoyed having you.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.